Looking to enhance the appeal and performance of your gym with state-of-the-art equipment? Look no further than the Gym Administrator. Founded by Sal Corrente, professional wrestling manager, promoter, and author of the great book Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend, available on Amazon.com, the Gym Administrator will spot you on that final rep and assist you every step of the way from purchase through installation, whether it be strength training, cardiovascular training, or performance enhancement. The Gym Administrator works with a wide array of leading vendors and suppliers, carefully selected to meet the diverse needs of your clientele. Service the way you remember it. Contact us at 914-494-1066 or visit our website at thegymadministrator.com, as well as all social media platforms. The Gym Administrator. All your fitness needs under one roof. Scan the barcode at the bottom of the screen to get started today.
It's Thursday, and it is another episode of This Week in Pro Wrestling with your host, Mike Monte, and the great Jimmy Pharaoh, straight out of Wahoo Saloon. Jimmy, how are you, buddy?
Good, man. What's going on? Here we are.
Here we are again, man. Always look forward to Thursdays. I got to tell you, this is, so you know earlier, I'll share with the audience, and I'll talk to you about it. My father, who you know, he's like 84, and he's had a Doberman Pinscher for 15 years, if anyone knows anything about dogs. That's a pretty long time to have a Doberman Pinscher. Well, unfortunately, the dog got sick recently, and we were probably looking at putting him down on Saturday, but he called me at work, and, the dog couldn't walk. It just became this giant ordeal. So I went to the house today. We put him down, and, again, it's weird in these moments, Jimmy. It's like, just I don't know what it is about the human body, but it's like you forget about death, especially when you're younger. As you get older, like we are, it becomes more of a thought. But every time something happens like that, it's like I thought to myself, like, is it worth having an animal? All the pain you go through at the end, it's a strange thing. I mean, what do you think of that?
Moses was a great dog. I got to get to know Moses a little bit. He was a great dog, very loving, very friendly. It's worth every second, because what animals, it's funny. We can't speak to them verbally, as far as they don't speak English or anything. Obviously, they're animals, but the connection with animals can be so much stronger than with people. And I think animals, quite honestly, are superior to humans, but that's just my personal take. They're worth every second. As you remember, right before I moved here, my cat Gray developed spleen cancer and was gone within 3 weeks. He was perfectly healthy when I left for Florida to visit Karen the first time around. It's terrible when it happens, but when you really think about the math of it all, 15 years of I would tend to think mostly nothing but joy for your father to have him there, and for you to have. You love dogs. I know how you feel about dogs. I have 2 of them now myself. They're worth every second, every last second. The good outweighs the bad by a mile, and it is really hard right now. But as time passes, and time heals the wounds, obviously, like Todd Rundgren wrote in his song. As time passes, you're only going to remember the good stuff. Sure, you'll reflect on the fact that the dog passed away, but in general, it's probably going to be 95.5, all the good stuff that the dog brought to the family and to your lives.
I appreciate that, Jimmy. again, I can't always remember what we speak about on the show because you and I have many private conversations, right? And I was thinking, as they begin to euthanize the dog, obviously, and
Yeah.
they give it painkillers so it relaxes, and then they kind of put him to sleep, and
Right.
here we go, the walk towards. I had this ultimate faith that like the dog was going to go see my mother on the other side. I envisioned them seeing each other and joining again, and I was thinking about like my faith in God. And again, if I mentioned this on the show, I apologize to everybody because I don't know how it turned into wrestling, but I started thinking about the Von Erichs. Like you and I talk about suicide often, and we both have like the views and stuff. And I think I said this before, but I give the Von Erichs tons of credit for the fact that they had a major faith in God. Like they had no doubt there was something on the other side. It was, I don't say it was easy for them to leave this earth, but they seemed to like not have too much of a problem with it. They knew they were going to see their brothers on the other side, or brother, or however that worked. Like, how do you feel about the whole death situation, going to the other side? And do you think, use our show for a bit, right? We've torn some people up, right? Not very godly. Do you think we pay for our acts even at this level? Or is God a fan of Monte the Pharaoh and he enjoys what we do? I don't know.
Is God a fan of Monte and the Pharaoh? Wow. Yeah. Sure he is. Why not? I think he's a fan of every single one of his children. I think that we pay prices right here. I don't think that for the ones that he chooses to save, that he doesn't sit there and like make them suffer more once they've passed through to the other side. If you're saved, or if God has favored you, whatever your background is, you can interpret that any way you like. All I'm saying is if God favors you, then he favors you. I don't think that he continues to punish you in the afterlife. I've always found it interesting that, some of the famous examples of people who've committed suicide, you are right about one strange thing. They don't seem to be afraid. They seem to be very positive. There's something on the other side that they're going to. Even Jim Morrison, whose death was never proven obviously to be a suicide, more likely just an overdose or a heart attack through all the drugs that the guy did. He was not afraid of the other side. He wrote about it constantly.
Right.
So it's really interesting. Kurt Cobain sat down and wrote a letter. I mean, dear so-and-so, piss off. I mean, I don't know, man. I will say one thing, though, about the good book. You said something interesting, that you'd like to believe that Moses is running to your mom right now. Well, I'll tell you why I believe that that's the case. God would not have asked Noah to put all the animals on the ark with him if he didn't want the animals saved as well. Saved being the key word. So I do believe that Moses right now is running straight for Susan Monte, so.
I want to share Jimmy Fingers, who we haven't seen in a while. I'm glad he's come back and he realized, I think he thought it was canceled, but he's always got great comments. I want to share this with you. Monty, I lost my dog today, and I'm beyond grief-stricken and beyond my means. Pharaoh just nailed it on the head. If I put on a scale the pain I feel right now against 11 years I got, you pay the freight for the loss every time. First of all, Jimmy, prayers to you, and I'm hoping, fond memories of you and your partner. I know how tough this is. I've gone through it a lot, and what scares me now is I have a relationship with a dog now that I've never had in my entire life. And as he gets older, the fear of losing him. I mean, when I read your word, stricken beyond my means, Jimmy, I totally get it. Because when I even sit on a couch and look at him and think of him as gone, my eyes well up. Because it's just an unbearable feeling.
Right.
But then
my first cat I got when I was basically 2 years old. I found Gray, the one that I spoke of that passed away before I came out here. I found Gray in a parking lot, the parking lot I lived in, and I was in my 50s when I found Gray. Gray was my favorite cat. So it's weird that, like you said, I don't know if that's because we're older and we appreciate life a little bit more. That might have something to do with the fact that you've recently discovered, after having dogs for I've known you forever. You had dogs when we were kids. It's interesting that later on in life, maybe the appreciation level for life goes up, because Gray was my favorite cat by far, and I already lived through what you're worried about. You will survive it, and hopefully you have a long way to go before that has to happen. You will survive it, but it's not easy.
Well, some deep conversation, and I apologize for bringing that up, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yes.
I want to remind everybody at the 9 p.m. show we have the incredible Wendy Richter. Jimmy, from starting off with Bob Cook to Greg Gagne, right, to Rockin' Robin,
right,
to Hollywood,
right,
to Wendy Richter. And if that,
I'm
go ahead.
I'm really kind of speechless. We're doing so much so quickly recently. You know how it becomes like a blur. Remember when I was there in studio with you, and we used to do those marathons?
Yes,
dude. Sometimes it would take weeks to months for the memories to hit me. Like right now, life is going very, very fast right now.
Yeah.
It's like I'm running really, really quickly right now. There's a lot of things going on in my personal life. There's a lot of things going on with the show. And I do know that we're in the middle of right now cranking out some great, great library stuff, because that's, after all, our biggest pride and joy is our library, bringing out, these great names. And it's all been a blur, but I know that it's been great. And I'm going to really enjoy eventually at some point taking a moment to breathe and think about all of this stuff, because tonight's going to be just as one of the greatest of all, quite honestly.
Listen, absolutely. I mean, listen, you knew I was a big mark for Rockin' Robin for sure. Also a big mark for Greg Gagne. You came out of that interview loving the hell out of it. I mean, the thing I get off on most is when people say, man, you guys, thank you for this great interview. It meant the world to me. When we could bring joy to other people, it's that's the achievement to me that is probably the most important. I want to remind everybody that the gathering, I think, is coming up in early August. Karen McDaniel will be at the gathering along with our own Jimmy Pharaoh. Jimmy will be available for autographs and pictures and meet the Pharaoh. Karen McDaniel will be in her booth. I'm excited. The gathering's a big deal, and I'm glad, Jimmy, you'll be representing the show. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a great experience. However, Mike, I have to say, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder trying to make sure there's nobody we haven't pissed off.
So
should I bring my brass knuckles?
I think you may have to bring your brass knuckles, dude.
Yeah.
I am fully expecting something crazy to happen. I'm expecting to get a phone call by the end of that weekend. Next week, another big show. We've got so we don't do a lot of combo shows with other shows, right? We're pretty selective. And I'll ask Jimmy about this so he could share his thoughts. We've been burnt by a lot of people in this business, especially early on. We've gotten much better, but we still somehow find ourselves in a trap. Most recently, we know that from, WhattaDay, taking advantage of yet another situation. But a show that I do enjoy immensely and is maybe one of the originators of this wrestling talk show stuff is Don Tony and the Don Tony and Kevin Castle show. Don Tony will be live 9 o'clock next Thursday. If I'll share my thoughts about Don Tony, how I found him before we were even doing this, Jimmy, I would tune into Don Tony and Kevin Castle. I found them, purely just found them. I don't know how I found them. And it was like a raw recap show, and they were very engaging, and their chemistry, like ours, was incredible. And the interesting thing about Don Tony and Kevin Castle is they talk about real life stuff too, and they've had real life drama. They, as a team, have separated at times and had a falling out. Don Tony's had falling outs with other people, and we've actually had some moments with Don Tony, right? His relationship with Misha Montana and Matt Riddle, and our non-relationship with Misha Montana and Matt Riddle.
Right.
But the one thing between this show and Don Tony and Kevin Castle's show is we've never disrespected each other. We might have talked a little bit about each other, our disagreements about stuff, but we were never disrespectful. And I think it goes a long way because there's actually respect, which we don't necessarily always respect some people on the other side. You want to weigh in on my thoughts there, or your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I only know of Don Tony through you in the beginning. I don't do as much internet surfing, obviously, as you do. And, you told me about him, and I checked it out. And, look, the guy's very knowledgeable. I'll say that. They're both very knowledgeable. They're very passionate about what they do. They give a professional presentation, so there is respect there. I know that you've had some problems with Don Tony. I mean, you know me. Usually, I wait to see what's going on. If somebody gets a little too douchey, then, we respond accordingly. But it didn't get to that with Don Tony and his partner, Kevin, did it? I don't think so.
No, it hasn't. And again, I'm looking forward to this because we have some very tough questions for Mr. Anthony DiBlasi, right?
How did this? Can I ask how this came about? I mean, how does this come about? Did you contact him? I mean,
I reached out and I said, Tony, I think it's time. I really want you to come on the show. He's mentioned us on his show. We've mentioned on his show, but we never really got that meeting of minds. And look, we're both in the same age range. Our thought processes are somewhat the same. And again, I'm not a fan of a lot of shows, right? I like. We've had Sean Oliver on. We have immense respect for Mr. Oliver. I personally love Click This. Sean is excellent. And listen, if someone's got talent, I'll say they have talent, right? Doesn't mean I have to like them, but I'll say they had talent. I mean, I don't know if I'm out of line saying this. Like, I thought Scampoli had talent. I just thought he was low-hanging fruit, like cheap shot stuff. Not witty.
His talents were terribly misplaced.
Yes, thank you. So someone can be talented but also be a hack, right?
Right. Of course.
Isban is asking you, Jimmy, is there a wrestler out there that you haven't interviewed yet that you wish you could interview?
Ooh, Isban. That's a good question. Geez. I have to think about that. Mike, weren't we just having this conversation on the phone the other day, you and me?
We were.
Like, who's left? You know who I'd love to get, but she's not a wrestler. Coming off the heels of what we're going to have tonight, I want to get Cyndi Lauper.
Yes, I agree. I would love to have Cyndi Lauper. That's a great choice right there, Jimmy. I'll tell you what. One of my bucket lists is the guest we're going to have on at 9 o'clock. Wendy Richter was a huge part of me growing up and my love for wrestling. I've always said the women sparked everything. At some point, they're the ones that ignite the spark. They may not be the ones, like you've always said, the men are the ones that carried it on, but the women are always the ones that seem to light it and get it rolling. Right.
Well, that makes sense, though. It always has made sense historically. You could go back to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
It's true. Wendy Richter, believe it or not, I was a big fan of Wendy Richter. Absolutely at the time. How could I not be rooting for her? I mean, I never liked Moolah, for God's sakes. I mean, but to Moolah's credit, the best villainous bitch ever, basically, right? What a bitch.
Absolutely.
So it was the perfect matchup at the perfect time. It was big time. You have to have that ingredient. I'll agree with that. Look, if you take either Victor or Hogan out of the equation, what are we talking about
Well,
here?
that's what I was going to ask you. If
you know,
Moolah and Richter does not happen, does WrestleMania happen?
yeah, I think so.
Really?
I think
Okay.
I think it happens anyway. I think Vince had his vision, but it's almost silly to try to rewrite the what if sometimes. It's fascinating to explore, but obviously this was all part of Vince's vision, you know. Cyndi Lauper was the right one, and it's odd that at the time Cyndi Lauper was more than happy to go along and do it, and today she never mentions wrestling, So I find that interesting that she was the perfect person at the time, but now does she even acknowledge it? We don't even know.
I did see her on a talk show, and they brought it up to her, and I think she does want to be in the Hall of Fame. I think she realizes how important that ended up being for her career.
Right.
I think it rubbed both sides. We spoke about Don Tony, so we're looking forward to that. I also added to the mix on the show as I wanted to get a little update on our friend WhattaDay Joe. WhattaDay Joe, if anyone wants to know, moved over to the Lee Cole channel. Lee Cole, who he trashed on a regular basis. Lee Cole, who he didn't even know what the Ring Boy scandal was. Lee Cole, who he saw was getting some substantial views and thought possibly that would roll over to his channel. If everybody doesn't, I've had some people writing me, telling me he's on the channel. I will tell you, there she is, Miss Maria Davis, the First Lady. Welcome back. Thank you again for being a member of the channel. I will personally state this. If all the guys that we are women, men, women, whatever, beasts that we've met since doing this, Jimmy, WhattaDay Joe is very high on my list. I've talked to you privately, and I'm like, I cannot get my disdain for this guy out of my heart, no matter how hard I try.
Right. Well, he worked hard to get that place in your heart, Mike.
He did. He worked it. He earned it. So anyway, I was on the phone with the player Scala, who has very good talents, right? So the player wrote a poem or a song. I didn't even realize it was a song, by the way, until you pointed it out. And I can't sing, and Jimmy is the professional singer.
Oh, come on.
So Jimmy is going to sing the player's poem to WhattaDay because, again, he's renting space in my mind, and why not execute the star of the show to try to alleviate that space in my mind with this wonderful song. And I think Jimmy's got something special after that. So, Jimmy, the floor is yours before we get into This Week in Pro Wrestling.
That's just great. Well, to the audience at home, this is my faith. And the reason why you're seeing my face is that my boneheaded partner put the print on the script too small, so I can't read the song. So I'm gonna sing the song to you, composed by the great Benny Scaler. This is based off of the theme from Beverly Hillbillies. A 1, a 2, and 3. Listen to my story about WhattaDay Joe. Got himself fired from the M&P show. Told Michael Monte, I'll be sending you my bill, but Mike had enough of the WhattaDay pill. Suppository. Wrecked a bullet.
That's awesome.
Well, the next thing you know, Joe's yakking with Lee Cole, spewing out the same old shit and rigmarole. Joe Centerville's the place you ought to be. There's a big old reward for catching cakes, baby. Swiss rolls, zebra cake, brownie bites. The end.
Beautiful, unbelievable. That deserves a round of applause. A round of applause.
Oh my God, the things we do. The things we do. Benny, I hope I did it justice. I did the best I could with it. I think you did great there.
I think that was fantastic. Are you going to save the special? RJ Hudson says the WhattaDay Hillbillies.
Yeah, pretty much. So, Mike, I was telling you that recently I don't know where I've been living. Obviously, I've been living in a cave, but this Benny thing inspired me. I sat down here at the table about 5 minutes before we went on the air. There's this song that I didn't realize is so popular and has been popular for like 15 years now, called Mr. Brightside. from some band called The Killers that are very successful. It passed me by. I had no idea. But I love the chorus. So I penned this out in remembrance of Frankenhead Joe.
All right, beautiful. I'm excited.
Here we go. A one, a two, and jealousy got canned by old M&P. Guess that I'll go lead shortly. How come no one's backing me? Least I have my bad veneers. This fake tan looks very weird. I'll just run my mouth instead. Cause I'm Mr. Frankenhead.
Oh my God. Incredible. You know what, dude? If I could stand up, I would just be that was fed. And what's amazing is you wrote that in literally 2 minutes before the show. And that hack, WhattaDay, couldn't even touch that if he had someone writing it for him. That's the joke about it all.
No, he'll try to pull shit off the computer and put pictures up. By the way, I loved his interpretation of me because I look just like Eddie on the cover of Iron Maiden's A Matter of Life and Death. I loved it. I was like, that's fucking cool. I'm a horror figure. Bro, whatever you do, I'm going to probably wind up liking anyway. You have no talent.
I honestly didn't like mine because I'm not a chef, number one. And, again, I know I'm fat, but I'm not that fat. I mean, come on. Give me some reality. I mean, the guy looked like a giant chef. I mean, come on. Really? Stop. I'm serious. I mean, look, if you're going to do that type of stuff, have some sort of, like, realism to it. Like, the guy looked nothing like me. It's like, like, you don't put a chef hat on me. It's like, I'm not a chef. You know what I mean? Come on, get it right.
Yeah. You see this Florida tan? This is real. It's a real tan.
It's a real
tan.
My
teeth are real too.
It's a real tan.
My teeth are real too. Unfortunately,
That's a good. Wait. Whoa. I just can't. I don't even know. I don't know. Again, I don't know what to say here. All I could say is he's gone viral. Just so you know, WhattaDay Joe's gone viral. He copied some raw tapes and he put some words on it, over it, and he put it on his channel, and he's telling everybody he's gone viral. Because he's that talented. He's really good at recording videos from Raw and putting it on his channel and saying, I've gone viral.
Right. Well, you know what I loved too the most is when these kind of people make their biography thing, their little synopsis of them.
Oh yeah, I love it.
You know, millions and millions of people have heard his voice. Millions.
Oh, you've read that. You read that. Go to his LinkedIn page. It's even worse.
Yeah, I spit my RC Cola all over the table.
You know he's a full-time worker for Sportskeeda now, too, right?
Oh, well, congratulations.
And by the way, if anyone doesn't understand Sportskeeda, right, it's a bunch of guys that write for Sportskeeda, and they get paid like ad hoc, right? They're contracted writers. So, hello, no one works for Sportskeeda is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Because, if you're a wrestler for the WWE, doesn't mean that you work for the WWE. What it means is you wrestle for the WWE. You're an independent contractor. Someone who works for the WWE is maybe the accounting team or maybe the camera crew or maybe even the people that put up the rings, Lee Cole. So those would be workers. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Uh-huh. I got you. That's the legalities of it.
Let's talk a little wrestling, my friend.
Yeah.
So, the Wyatt Sick6. Again, I didn't know they changed this because at first it was Wyatt 6 on X, right? It was Wyatt with a 6. Now they changed it to Sick6. So, Bo Dallas is Uncle Howdy. Nikki Cross, they're saying is Sister Abigail. I'm not so sure it's accurate, so don't hold me to that. Eric Rowan is Ramblin' Rabbit.
Right.
Joe Gacy is Huskus.
Right.
The pig, and Dexter Loomis is Mercy the Buzzard. So they made their debut on Raw. What were your thoughts about this debut?
I thought the presentation was amazing. I thought it was excellent as far as its look and its feel and the presentation and the costumes. I thought it was great. I really did. I thought that they did a great job with it. We talked about it on the phone during the week. That's WWE production. That's something that Tony Khan should, we've said it last week, even on the show, Tony Khan should sit down and think long and hard about his production. That is something only the WWE can currently supply, is what we saw at the end of the show. That was great. I mean, if we're just talking about the segment itself, that was great.
Where do you go from here? So now I agree with you. It was great. Where do you go from here? So my opinion, right? The Wyatt family was, about a cult leader who led some troubled people, and they became the Wyatt family, and they were it was characters that could wrestle and do things. No superpowers. We move on to The Fiend and Alexa Bliss, who has superpowers, and I guess she was Sister Abigail at one point, and maybe she still is. At what point does it just get too hokey? Because, look, I shared with you, man. I always thought Bray Wyatt at best was a serviceable, and I love using your word, serviceable wrestler. Obviously, great character, right? But when he became The Fiend, he no longer was even a serviceable wrestler. It was an impossibility to wrestle in that outfit, and it was awful to me. So what makes it anything different this time around? What are they going to do differently?
I have no idea, because I'm not sure you can sustain this gimmick, because at some point, like we've said on the phone to each other in private, you got to get in the ring. You're going to have to get in the ring and have matches and tell stories. I compare it to, even though it in its debut, it doesn't look that way, but in its end result, it could wind up feeling this way. I used to watch a lot of AAA Lucha Libre at Mexico. And there's so many ridiculous over-the-top gimmicks that at some point you feel like you're watching a clown show or a circus instead of what you tuned in for in the first place. Really good, believable wrestling matchups. You want to have some believability. I don't really think that this is something long-term unless Stephen King comes in and figures out some way to keep these guys, interesting every week. They're going to have to get in the ring at some point. Could you imagine Rowan having to wrestle in that rabbit outfit? I mean, how is this going to sustain itself over months and even years? Right now, that doesn't look too good to me. But we're going to have to wait and see what they have planned. That's all we can really do.
But Jimmy, I'm also a believer in the people who are in the gimmick, right? And I understand sometimes a wrestler will be bad for a long time. They just can't get over, but they find that one gimmick that gets them over. Like, I think about Mean Mark Callis, right? When he was in WCW, right? Even though he wasn't really over there, he still had that, when he was in the, what were they called? The Twin Towers, him and Spivey. I forget what they called their name, but skyscrapers. They were badasses. It wasn't like he wasn't a badass. When he came over to WWE, I recognized him. I'm like, oh, it's Mean Mark. I didn't get upset. I was like, oh, it's Mean Mark Callis. But my point is, that whole list I read to you are guys that just couldn't even get, like Bo Dallas, to be fair, couldn't get over. Nikki Cross, how many gimmicks did she run through the WWE and can't get over? Dexter Lumis. I never got that character. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just giving you my opinion.
Right. No, I think you're right. The only thing that I will say in defense of Bo Dallas, because I am a fan of his.
Yes.
I am. Bo Dallas, when he was in NXT, was great. Bo Dallas was never presented that way in WWE. He should have been. Bo Dallas has some great, great talents. I don't think that this gimmick you'll see any of them. Not the Bo Dallas that we knew. So and Bo strikes me much less creative than his brother, just as a person. Bray was really special. Bray was 1 in a billion.
Right.
And Bo is more of a follower than a leader. Bray thought for himself, obviously, and walked his own path in life, obviously, and walked away from wrestling when his brain wasn't right, obviously. Bo has been happy to tag along in a lot of cases. So I'm really curious as to who's going to be writing the scripts here, because I don't think it's Bo. So who was behind that presentation, and how far ahead have they thought? These are questions I would love to have answers to. Until then, we get to just wonder and tune in every week. But, that's part of the magic of the program. You want to know what the hell, the answer is going to be the next week if you have questions. So for now, stay tuned.
I want to get to some questions because there's some interesting questions on the board. So Matt Sharkey, Indian Potato, good questions. Just bear with me because I got something I want to cover with Jimmy real quick.
Yeah.
So right before the Attitude Era, they used to have a show on cable. I don't know if it was TNN or whatever. They used to interview the wrestlers. And it was really on the cusp of the Attitude Era. And I remember Bret Hart being on there, and he was talking about his high respect for The Undertaker, but he felt it was time for The Undertaker to stop with silly gimmicks and just be a badass. And that's when the American Badass came out. I guess someone paid attention to what Hart had to say, or maybe it was just the Attitude Era. So my question to you is this. Considering how great the WWE is now, and Matt, I know you're not a big fan. It's going to be hard for them to win you over, but it hasn't been this good since the Attitude Era, and I'd even say it's better. It's real-life stuff going on. Does this hokey, science, fiction, horror, like watered down the WWE product? Like, all of a sudden you see Chad Gable beaten up with blood hanging out of his mouth. It's like, I don't know, man. You're really on this hot road. You got McIntyre, Punk. You got Damian Priest. Is this a mistake even doing this?
Good is good, and that was good. If they can continue to make it good, then it'll be good. You can have, I find it hilarious that during the Attitude Era, the Undertaker had to get serious. Some of that crap in the Attitude Era was some of the cheese. I mean, come on, he gave birth to Mae Young gave birth to a hand.
That is true.
He's worried
That is true.
He's worried about whether or not the Undertaker would get over. It was all in the presentation. If something is written well and it suits the characters, then it's going to be good. I'm sure even Sharky will agree. If something's good, it's good.
Well, here's what Sharky says. He says he hopes Vince isn't the higher power of the Wyatt family. I kind of would dig that. That would be pretty cool.
I would love that, but that's me. It was me. It was me all along.
Here's a good comment from someone, Indian Potato. Do you think the WWE will relaunch WCW? Because I feel like this Vice WCW documentary is an open platform. Plus, Conrad asked Eric on his show of this question, and Eric just paused.
They have two brands. They have Raw and SmackDown. Why would they create another one? I don't see the point in it. I really don't. Raw and SmackDown are two different entities, and they join together at WrestleMania, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. WCW, well, it would remind me of when they rebooted ECW. It's not going to be the same. People are going to compare it, blah, 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 blah. Hey, if you want to see a really crappy version of WCW, tune into AEW on Wednesday nights.
Wow. Bang. With a exclamation point. This week on WCW, What Killed WCW, they went into Bischoff and Russo. And, we covered who we thought. You gave your percentages you thought last week. But this is what Vince Russo said on the show, and I really need you to weigh in. I was a better on-air character than 80% of the WCW roster. WCW has become a popular topic lately with the release of Vice's Who Killed WCW docuseries. This week's episode was titled New Blood, featuring none other than Vince Russo. Many fans, some of the veterans who worked with Russo at WCW, often blame him for the company's fall in quality, and according to the man himself, this wasn't the case. I'm just going to be the 1,000% completely honest with you. As far as an on-air character, I felt I was better than 80% of the roster. Russo boldly claimed the criticism Russo faces is often due to him booking himself onto his show and putting the WCW world title around his waist. However, he explained that happened on the receiving end of a ton of pressure. I made the mistake of saying, you know what? Fuck it. If you want ratings, I'll go out there and get ratings myself. I almost got killed, bro. I almost got killed. Russo pointed out that Goldberg was trying to purposely hurt him on the show. Weigh in on your remembrance of Vince Russo, WCW, and eventually the demise of WCW.
Yeah, it's funny. Vince Russo says that he was better than 80% of the roster, and he wonders why the locker room probably has no regard for him to this day. It's almost like a guy that you ever play that basketball game, Horse?
Yeah.
Okay, and you got a guy with one shot. Russo, if he was playing Horse, would just keep shooting from the free throw line because it's the game that suits him. So he builds a whole program written around his Crash TV failure shit and then makes himself the star of it. Of course, he's going to have more on air time and more, over, getting over because he's putting himself over. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen in the history of television was when Vince Russo decided to put the belt on himself. It was the laughing stock, and as far as Goldberg hurting him, I find that hilarious. What does that tell you about how the wrestlers must have felt about Vince Russo, the person behind the scenes? Goldberg is not even a lifer, has never, proclaimed a love for professional wrestling. You know what I mean? He's not a Bret Hart, and he's out there trying to kill Russo. What does that tell you? It tells me quite a lot. It tells me Goldberg had no regard for him, and Goldberg is even protecting the business when it comes to a guy like Russo.
Well, that's
I'm going to
crazy.
run you through. Think about that. That to me is insane.
That's funny.
I mean, man, you must be really disliked in the back, bro. I mean,
but like, here's my question. We talked about Nash last week, like not taking ownership, right? And I'm thinking to myself, Russo the whole time is defending his time in WCW. Isn't it all about results? And at some point, like, look, Bischoff did a great job. He got them. They were competing, but eventually he couldn't sustain it, and he failed. Right. And I almost think Bischoff kind of accepts the fact that Vince McMahon was the better promoter. End of story. Right. No matter how cut and dry, it's the end result. Russo, on the other hand, he just won't admit it. Like, look, dude, why wouldn't Russo say, you know what? I was really good at my job, but you know what the problem was? I didn't have a Vince McMahon controlling me. If I would have had a Vince McMahon at WCW, I would have been successful. And unfortunately, I felt that I had no one on my side because he talked about Sullivan not being on his side. He talked about, he basically was blaming Kevin Sullivan for part of WCW's problems. And, I think Sullivan's been somewhat successful, right? I would consider Sullivan one of the great bookers of all time.
Russo is the reason why they sank in the end. Russo could not help them one bit. Do you realize how much torture Bischoff had to go through? I've thought about this often. Bischoff had to team up with him. Bischoff took the check, and I'm sure Bischoff would be the first to tell you, look, I got offered money to come back. But he must have been sickened by the thought of having to share anything with Vince Russo because it didn't work out. They did not get along, obviously. History says so. What does it tell you when Bischoff, and even more importantly, a guy like Jim Cornette, he couldn't stand him. Jim Cornette is a lifer. The guy, whether you love him or hate him, that guy knows his wrestling, and he couldn't stand the sight of Russo being involved in booking.
Well,
because Russo was about soap operas. That's it. It was all soap operas and crash television for Russo. And when he had Vince, it was under control. And when he didn't, the proof's in the pudding. What happened, happened.
Let's talk about Russo, the person. Again, we don't know him, but let's be fair about this. Russo, from what we've learned about him from the many guests that we've had on, is an opportunist, right?
Right.
Who's the guy, your friend? Arezzi. He took it, he met Arezzi, saw an opportunity to be able to get involved in something with wrestling because, again, I found out that, did you know Russo actually tried out at the Johnny Rod School of Wrestling? I wish I would have asked Johnny about that. I wonder if Johnny even remembers him. But, so the guy wanted to be a wrestler. So he meets Arezzi. He somehow weasels his way into Arezzi. And then somehow, with the use of working off of Arezzi, he gets into the WWE writing the magazine, right? He had a journalist degree, right? Okay.
Right.
Opportunist. Now, there's plenty of opportunists in life, but again, I think there's a difference between being an opportunist and having actual talent. Right. I don't really believe he had a lot of talent, dude. I believe that he saw Jerry Springer and he said, let's make WWE Jerry Springer because it's the hot thing. And it didn't translate when he went to WCW because Jerry Springer, in last week's episode, he explains that Jerry Springer was hot. It wasn't hot when he went over there. It was dying at that point. It was hot during the Attitude Era.
Agreed. Again, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon reeling him in, the WCW might have wound up winning the war. One of the best things that ever happened was Vince Russo leaving. We took off after Vince Russo left. WWE took off and wound up buying WCW. Look, he can rewrite history all he wants, but history's already spoken.
That's a great comment, Jimmy. That's the facts, right? The facts are already in the books. It's spoken. You lost. So you can't defend it. You lost. You failed. In the end result,
Right.
There's an F on your report card, Vince Russo. Be man enough to say, I failed. Everybody could give reasons why they fail. Oh, I didn't get support from the president of my company. Oh, I didn't have enough funds to do this. That happens all the time. It's the
Right.
end result. If you fail, you fail. He failed. In the end
Right.
result, Eric Bischoff, for the first 2 quarters of high school, got A's. The second half, he failed.
Right. Right. I'll tell you what, as a wrestling purist, I have to say this too. In defense of the 80% of the roster that he thinks he was better than, if you examine back in those days, the guys at the bottom of the card, what kind of ego are we talking about where he feels that he has more talent? Now, it gets back to talent, right, Mike? We're talking about talent. He's going to say with a straight face that he had more talent than the bottom of the card guys like, oh, I don't know, Juventud Guerrera? You have more talent than Juventud Guerrera? Have you ever watched Juventud Guerrera wrestle back in the day? He was one of the guys that built the cruiserweight division, okay? I mean, he has more historical importance to what he contributed as a performer than Vince Russo's 5 minutes of putting the belt around himself and the ratings tanking and the company closing.
Hey, Jimmy.
I find that insulting as a purist.
Jimmy, you're 100% right. But here's the deal. Like, Vince Russo won't come on this show, right? But, he'll watch and he'll say whatever he's got to say like the rest of them, right? So here's the thing,
Right.
Russo. When you go on, why don't you, on your next show, be honest and, because Indian Potato is a good point. Why don't you tell the people how many scripts Vince McMahon threw back in your face and said, no way we're going with that? How about you give those percentages? Because I bet you they're high. And that's a great comment, Indian Potato. How many do you think that Vince McMahon said, we're not running this shit, it's garbage?
Right. Agreed.
I mean, that's all he talks about is his wins. Oh, I did this, I did that. How about the shit that got thrown back at in your face?
Right. Right. Well, he's keeping his brand value up by ignoring all that other stuff, just like most people do.
Let me ask you this question, and you probably know better than me. Was Russo still in the WWE when Owen Hart fell to his death?
That's May of '99. Oh, when did he leave? Did he leave at the end of '99?
I'm not sure. If anyone knows.
I can't answer that. Yeah, I know it was the same year. Pretty sure it was the same year. He might have left a little bit after that, but then again, you know what? I've never heard him talk about. Has he ever talked about it?
I think he has. I think he said it was disgrace that they didn't end that show, which many people have said. But we've also heard wrestlers say, you don't know what it was like if you weren't in the fire. But my question is, he left in like late September, R.J. Hudson says. So I'm going to assume that Vince Russo was there, and I'm going to assume that Vince – oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Roddy Piper on TNA did a shoot thing with Russo, blaming him for the death of – you know what? I'm so stupid. He did blame him. It was obviously a work, but he blamed him. But why doesn't Vince Russo take responsibility for that? Because clearly he was writing the scripts. Didn't he do the Blue Blazer thing?
I don't know. Well, it's much more fashionable to just blame everything that's started since Adam and Eve bit the apple on Vince. So you might as well just blame Vince.
All right, Jimmy,
one way or the other.
we got 2 minutes here, but then we got to get ready for the main show with the great,
Wendy
Richter. Triple H reacts to Drew McIntyre quitting Raw live. Triple H says, looks like he's had enough. Thoughts on that gimmick?
Looks like he's had enough. That's all he said. That's hilarious. I thought it was good. I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought they did it good. We'll see him in a week or two. Maybe 3. I don't know. But he'll be back, obviously. Drew's awesome. Drew's doing a great job.
You know what's funny? I want to tell that quick story. Me and Jimmy went to a firehouse one time, a wrestling event. Was that the one with Snuka or X-Pac? And it was one or the other, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was snooker.
And what was the organization Drew was wrestling for at that? Because he already was released from the WWE, and Jimmy was good.
Yeah.
What was it?
No. I can't remember.
Okay.
I'm thinking.
I
Go
just
ahead.
remember Jimmy going, "We got to stay, man. Drew McIntyre is wrestling," and I'm like, "That guy sucks." But that's why I always respect Jimmy, because even when I say things suck, I realize in the future, like McIntyre is he's become one of the greats. I think he was drunk that night, though, Jimmy, to be honest with you, right? He was hammered, like falling in the ring, right? Yeah.
Shit, not falling, but clearly.
Hey, listen, clearly enough that you and me knew he was shit-faced.
Well, we were also in the first row because there might have been 10 people there.
Yeah, that is true.
It was a firehouse, Mike. Remember the hoses were hanging too low, and they couldn't jump off the top rope without hitting them.
I just remember too Jimmy going out like. Jimmy always had it like that. Before you know, he's walking out with some hot girl. I'm like, what the fuck is? Remember that? Do you remember that?
All she did was ask for a cigarette.
Yeah, but you went out with her. You went outside with her. I don't know what you did after that, but all I'm saying is it always ended up like that. I remember a lot of things from that night. But Drew McIntyre being hammered, and he was all red too. He was all flush. His blood pressure must have been up.
Right. But I remember when you saying he sucked. I was like, no, he doesn't. He gave a great promo for a hammered guy.
Yeah, he did give a good promo.
He put Flair to shame. He for a hammered guy, he was great. He gave a great promo. And I said to myself, I'm like, now this guy shouldn't be here. This guy should not be here. This guy's great.
He should not be performing in front of 10 people at a firehouse.
Right. The piano man was going through my head. Sit at the bar and put bread in my jar and say, man, what are you doing here? What was he doing there?
Jimmy, there was a point me and Jimmy used to go to a lot of independent shows because it was kind of fun. There was one FTW we used to go in the middle of, like, it used to be on to 1 a.m. We'd be out there. But one of my favorite moments is we saw Greg really early on before we even were doing the show. And we went to see Greg Valentine, and Valentine took his shirt off, and we were like, no.
Well, you ruined it for me because I was looking so forward to seeing him, and he gets in the ring, and he's got his robe on. And I'm like, yeah, it's the Hammer. And then he starts to take the robe off, and you had your jaw dropped, and you're staring at him, and I'm looking at you. And you're going, oh, God, please don't. And then I look over, and Greg takes the robe off, and there's more chins than a Chinese phone book.
And with that, this has been This Week in Pro Wrestling. We'll see you at 9 o'clock with Hall of Famer. This is a huge one, Miss Wendy Richter. Jimmy?
We'll see you in a few short moments where we rock and wrestle with Wendy Richter. Later.